So, our first novel for Year 9, Animal Farm by George Orwell. Orwell, of course, is probably more famous these days for 1984, and his work has become so ubiquitous, which means it's everywhere, that his style really and I suppose his thematic concerns have become known collectively as something that can be described as Orwellian. So looking at this particular book, we'll start to understand exactly what that kind of means. Now, this text, Animal Farm, was deliberately written as a response to early 20th century politics and the Russian Revolution, and then, of course, the ensuing Cold War that followed World War II, given that Russia and the Soviets, the USSR, became a superpower against Western countries like the USA. And it's a look into what was going on in terms of collectivism and communism and the idea of a collective society as opposed to an individualistic capitalist society. And there were failings that could be seen from the outside, looking at those societies. Stalin in Russia became quite despotic, quite powerful and difficult, and dictator-like, as had happened in many other societies, both with right and left-wing political groups. And so this book tries to look at how and why that occurs, or occurred, or indeed possibly can occur again. And he sets it in the style of a children's story almost. And so therefore we get an interesting term. So the term we're looking for is, it never does these really well, allegory. Okay? So that's a story that kind of is told like a bedtime story, a children's story, but it's metaphorical. It actually has a deeper meaning and teaches us a lesson. And so he's using this style to talk to us about what was going on in that particular era and what might be the root cause of it. And so let's have a look at this style. And the style is very sort of childlike storytelling. Mr. Jones of Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk, that's a different issue there, to remember to shut the pop holes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the backyard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way up to bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. So in this particular thing, the style is quite childlike. He locked the hen houses for the night, but then there's a moment of sort of adult life coming into this. You've got this alcohol business here, drinking, and he is drunk, of course, and he drinks again. And so those particular moments tell us that what we're definitely not doing is reading a children's story. So Mr. Jones runs what is known as Manor Farm. Now, it's an interesting title as well. There it is there, Manor. Meaning it's obviously a farm that was run off privately owned land. A manor in England is almost an area that is lorded over by a single landowner, where everything's drawn up into lots for other people, and often the fruits of your labour are not given to the farmer himself, but given to the lord of the manor, of which Mr. Jones has become a neglectful version of. So what was obviously once a great, beautiful and incredible place has fallen into disarray due to the poor keeping of Mr. Jones, of which we find out again pretty soon. Now, pretty early on in the piece, we get introduced to this old pig called Old Major, and it's pretty clear from the get-go that in the hierarchical world of the animals, the pigs are number one. Despite the fact that there will be a claim of animal equality, it's very clear that the pigs control that, and the pigs therefore use those rules for their own ends and means. So despite the fact that Manor Farm is all about, the Jones in charge and the animals being subservient, inside of that particular society there are different sort of groupings and power bases. So Major calls them in for this meeting. It says here he sits on a sort of raised platform. So we already understand it's kind of podium-like. The animals are not like animals we know. We get a pretty early concept that they're representative of human groupings. Now, of course, Orwell made this pretty clear that this relates to a man called Marx, who I'm sure you've done a bit of research about. And this is this version of a person or a character, in this case the pig, sort of opening the doors to an ideal, to the concept of what they refer to as animalism. So he gives them this speech, and we're describing each of the different creatures that come in and their names, and it's again very childlike in that way, and it seems very peaceful and very lovely and all that kind of stuff, and it's absolutely what it should be. But the language, of course, is characteristic. So we learn about Boxer being enormous. We learn about Clover being motherly. So you look at these kind of adjectives, and then you get to understand the nature and creature that will be exploited later in the story. We have other animals that are not very bright. We have here Boxer being enormous, but not of first-rate intelligence. But he is respected for his power and his work ethic. So the story continues, and old Major starts to converse with these people, all these animals. Now all the animals were present except Moses, a tame raven, who slept on a perch behind the back door. And when Major saw they all made themselves comfortable and were waiting attentively, he cleared his throat and began. Now he uses the language of revolution. He uses the word comrade. Comrade, there it is there. Comrade has always been synonymous with political left-wing groups, from unions to the labour movement to the communist and socialist movements. Comrade coming from communist. And it is a way of getting rid of the idea of the personal pronoun and creating a collective pronoun. So instead of hyper-individuality, by calling someone he, she, I am, you call someone comrade, and it removes all levels of what they consider to be inequality. So I call you comrade, you call me comrade, instead of calling me Mr. Morrissey and I calling you by your name or young student or whatever it is. You just call each other comrade, and that equalises the relationship. That, therefore, as you can imagine, automatically causes problems, because despite that fact, there's an irony here, because the comrade, old Major, and then of course the other comrades who are the pigs, certainly aren't or don't consider themselves, I would imagine, to be equal of some of the other creatures or animals, because it's already been made clear to us that creatures like Boxer and Clover have a specific skill, and that skill separates them in certain ways from the other animals. Down here, down this way. Now, comrades, what is the nature of this life of ours? Let's face it, our lives are miserable, laborious, and short. We are given us so much food, and will keep breath in our bodies. Those of us who are capable to work to the last atom of our strength, so you get this hyperbolic phrasing, and the very instant that our usefulness has come to an end, we are slaughtered with hideous cruelty. And there's some powerful language there as well. So this is persuasive language, speech-making. No animal in England knows the meaning of happiness or leisure. No animal in England is free. The life of animal is misery and slavery. That is the plain truth. So the suggestion is a big one. Slavery, not working for a wage, not working for food, anything like that. simple bondsmanship, slavery. Therefore, your lives must be something that you have to fight against and rebel against. But is that part of the order of nature? Is it because the land of ours is so poor? No, comrades, 1,000 times no. A nice little hyperbolic phrase again. The soil is fertile, climate is good, everything's fine, so why are we hungry and starving? Why then do we continue in this miserable condition? Because nearly the whole of the produce of our labour is stolen from us by human beings. Now that phrase there is pretty much synonymous with what Marx suggested, that the produce of one's labour doesn't go to the worker but to the capitalist, to the owner. And he saw that as the greatest issue, and that is what the whole manifesto of communism was. And so you're getting that repeated in that section. So therefore, someone's taking what is rightfully ours from us. And if someone's doing that, there must be an enemy. There must be someone who has to be overthrown. They have disrupted what we would consider to be the natural order of things. Now, this is quite a palpable argument if you are one of these workers. It's quite evocative and it resonates for these people, and in this story for these creatures, because they are mistreated. Jones does mistreat them. So they have an argument. They have a reasonable argument. The problem is that there's always going to be hierarchy. There's never going to be the idea of comradeship, which we will see. So this all sounds very good, but in the end, it does not succeed. So he continues. So as Major continues, he keeps using the language of which we have become quite familiar. He keeps using the idea of, say, miserable lives. So the misery has now been repeated a number of times. So look at this particular speech in terms of rhetoric, in terms of good speech making. How is Major being convincing? And then we compare that to our political class and how they try and convince us of certain truths. This is how this kind of stuff works. I'm one of the lucky ones. I have over 400 children. Such is the natural life of a pig. I've lived a good life. But no animal escapes the cruel knife. To that horror we must all come. So every other animal he produces this sort of negative image. The only way to break it is to follow a certain type of leadership. That is, of course, to get rid of man, their version of an enemy. So Orwell basically has seen this very, very straightforward imbalance in nature and compared it to the imbalance in political truths in the world, and he's shaped it into this rhetoric of old Major here. Remember, comrades, your resolution must never falter. No argument must lead you astray. Never listen when they tell you that man and animals have a common interest, that prosperity of one is the prosperity of the others. Now that's interesting because that is what becomes the manifesto itself. And Major actually says this is not the truth. This is not what we are interested in. So it's kind of fascinating, this entire speech and how it actually works and how it operates. So as he moves on, he ends with this song and he goes down into this final statement. And now, comrades, I will tell you about my dream. So he offers them a vision, which you often see in rhetoric and stories. I cannot describe. It is a dream of the earth as it will be when man has vanished, but it reminded me of something that I'd long forgotten. Many years ago when I was a little pig, my mother and the other sows used to sing a song. I'd known that tune in my infancy, but it had long passed. Last night it came back to me in my dream. Now therefore, he's also arguing that there is a kind of a spiritual essence to all of this. There's a kind of foreshadowing. It's the natural way things should be. So he gets them all singing Beasts of England, Beasts of Ireland. And they sing the song. And it becomes another sort of thing that engages them emotionally. Cows lowed it, the dogs whined it, the sheep bleated. So it becomes a tremendous noise. Unfortunately, wakes up Mr. Jones, seizes his gun and shoots at the animals and silences them all down. However, the seed has been sown.